another item we were going to talk about on tonight's show, Big Ten Media Days. Tell us your thoughts about the Trojans who are going to be representing the program in Las Vegas, and that's a new thing. Big Ten Media Days in Vegas. Hello, West Coast. Like, that's bringing the 4 West Coast schools aboard. But anyway, your reaction and your insights into the contingent that USC is sending to Vegas.
Sure, Matt. Here's the headline here. Makai Lemon, Kamari Ramsey, and Elijah Paige to represent USC at Big Ten Media Days. So I think my initial thoughts, and then I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I think Kamari Ramsey's a no-brainer. I think he was a representative last year. He would have been, a first or second round pick if he entered the NFL draft this year. Bona fide defensive star, loyal enough to the program to come back for another year. Makes perfect sense. Like, it would be more of a surprise if he wasn't on here than if he was. I think Makai Lemon is another pretty obvious choice. I think he's, we pulled up the Pro Football Focus a couple weeks ago, last time I was on the show, where Pro Football Focus had him as the number 1 wide receiver going into 2025 there. And then ESPN had Jacoby Lane on one list, and we kind of, broke that down. But, he's obviously a star. Got the 90 overall in College Football 26. Like, all the things seem to be in place for him. People are predicting him to have a big breakout season. He's also just, the most established, consistent wide receiver. We talked about the big play potential and the red zone target that Jacoby Lane is. He flashed even more exciting kind of crazy little runs there at the end of the season than Makai Lemon did. But in terms of like whole body of work, Makai Lemon obviously did a little bit more. He also did some in the return game. So again, this is just a guy who is your most established offensive star, has been with the program. Again, makes sense. Elijah Paige is the surprising one. He's, to me, you're not sending Jaden Mayava, which is interesting. You're not sending, one of the running backs or maybe, another defensive guy, especially last year after how strong the defense was. Instead, you're sending this offensive tackle who hasn't always been the most beloved USC guy. He had his struggles, especially early in the season last year, but then really turned it around towards the end. There are a lot of people who wrote him off those first couple of weeks, but he really turned it around. But I think, sending him is really an indication on how the program feels about him. I think, you don't want to send a guy to Big Ten. I mean, you're kind of trying to send the best of the best to Big Ten Media Days, I would think, right? 2 or 3 of your top guys on your team who you want representing the program. So I think that indicates to me that the coaching staff feels that he's taken even another step forward in his development this year, and which is great news. He's obviously a big guy. Obviously, was a very talented high school player, and showed flashes. Pat McAfee was a guy who featured him on a show for a little segment at one point, and thought that he was a guy who had a lot of size, who could potentially be pretty dangerous on the offensive line. But I think this is real sign that he's developed, but I'm curious what your take is on this, man.
Yeah, Elijah Paige is clearly the story here. Makai Lemon and Kamari Ramsey are going to be big dogs, the kinds of players that a school generally should invite to media days. And you mentioned Jaden Mayava not here. Miller Moss was at Big Ten Media Days 1 year ago, so I think that's so. First off, Mayava not being there, I think that's a good decision. I think it's managing expectations, because that if Jaden Mayava was at Big Ten Media Days, he'd just be asked, "Are you ready? Are you good enough? Are you, have you learned the offense?" And that kind of thing might get pretty old pretty quickly for someone who is entering a prove-it season. So I like the decision not to have Mayava there. I think just let him study and in quiet behind the scenes, keep a lower profile. I think that works. And then the other thing, so Elijah Paige going there, that's also notable. And one of the things I always talk about in terms of coaching and coaching decisions, and obviously we'll be diving into this when the college football season gets rolling for real in late August. But even right now, we can say this. Okay, Lincoln Riley made a very conscious choice to have Elijah Paige at media days. Sometimes coaching decisions are all about just the strategy. Like, we need you to perform this role. We need you to be in this position. Come through for us, deliver for us. But another aspect of coaching decisions, which and every year this cannot be emphasized enough, because it's just one of the subtle nuances of coaching and of managing a roster and managing individuals. A lot of the time, coaching decisions are not so much about tactics themselves. It's about sending a message to the player. It's about creating a context for motivation. So, knowing that Elijah Paige struggled early last season, but then improved as the year went on, that he went through growing pains. We remember how awful he was against Michigan. He got bullied. He was rattled. Like, we can just all say it. Like, that's just was the reality of the situation. After he struggled in that first big road game against Michigan, had some uncomfortable moments, he could have wilted and he could have complained. No, he kept his head down. He worked hard. He got better. He improved. And so I think that having him at Big Ten Media Days is a statement of saying, hey, like, we trust your improvement, and now you need to bring it for a whole season. Now you need to be our best from game 1 through game 12. And so I think there's a very clear, conscious message being sent by Lincoln Riley to Elijah Paige. Be our big dog up front. And also, if you are elite, Elijah Paige, then our offensive line, which, you ask me, and people who know me and people who have followed this show with me on it, whether it's with you now, Ethan, or with Tim Prangley last year, everyone knows offensive line is the nerve center. It's the X factor. It is the hinge point, whatever you want to call it. If the offensive line can be elite, this team can be elite. It all goes to the offensive line. So having an offensive lineman in the group, it's a statement of urgency, but it's also kind of a way of saying, hey, Elijah Paige, be our big dog. Lead us, guide us, make life easier for Jaden Mayava, make life easier for this running game, make the pieces of the puzzle fit. So I think it's a really intriguing, and I would also say good decision. And now it's just up to Elijah Paige to justify the level of trust Lincoln Riley and the coaching staff are placing in him.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also something that I've talked about before that I'll bring up here again is just confidence. I've been begging Lincoln Riley all offseason to just instill confidence in Mayava. And I think this is another instance where he's instilling confidence in someone like Elijah Paige. Like, he's sending Elijah Paige with Kamari Ramsey and Makai Lemon, two more established stars. And he's like, look, we see you. The message it sends is, look, we see you on the same level as these guys. And that can go a long way for a player's confidence. I think that a big part of coaching, like you said, is you talked about coaching. I'm going to talk about coaching a little bit too. I think a big part of it is instilling confidence in some of your less confident players, especially the players who have a lot of potential, and their worst moments come when they're nervous and they don't believe in themselves. Their best moments come when they do. And I think that, Mayava is obviously someone who's like that a lot, but I think that Elijah Paige probably too. I'm sure that, part of the reason why Michigan was such a bad game for him was he was really, in the big house, quite literally, with the big boys now in, 120,000 fans and, just screaming in his face, and those big, NFL level Michigan defensive linemen, running down his throat. And that's like, Elijah Paige has the size and, the development to compete with those players. He just, sometimes you don't believe that you do because you've never done it before. You have to actually go out and see yourself do it before you get some of that confidence. But I think that confidence can also be built by the coaches telling you that you can do it. And that's, I think, probably part of this too, is Lincoln Riley saying, hey, we believe in you as one of our stars. We really want you to be here, and we believe that you can do it, and we wouldn't be sending you if we didn't. So So we're going to send you, and yeah, now it's on Elijah Paige, obviously, to do the work to back up that